From SpongeBob's unintentional neglect of Gary to Gary's very intentional neglect of SpongeBob, these are 10 of the saddest episodes of all time. We're kicking off our list with Have You Seen This Snail? An episode where SpongeBob basically neglects Gary enough to make him run away from home. The episode kicks off with SpongeBob bringing home snail food ready to feed Gary. But then what happens? He gets this ridiculous Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set with some absurd dirty bubble challenge that requires, get this, 29 trillion hits in a row.
I hereby accept your challenge.
And because SpongeBob is a poster boy for ADHD, he cannot bring himself to focus on literally anything else. He's instantly hooked, completely obsessed, and in the process, just forgets poor Gary entirely, which means no food. And when Gary's all like, hey, buddy, feed me, I'm starving, SpongeBob's so deep in his paddleball trance that he brushes him off and even yells at him to leave him alone. Seriously? That's your best friend, man. So, with his little snail heart shattered, Gary just slinks out of the house and leaves town entirely, which is surprisingly heartbreaking for this show. Days later, Patrick pops in.
That's strange. Usually I knock on the door with this hand.
Casually mentioning he actually completed the Dirty Bubble Challenge.
I won, but then I lost the trophy they sent me.
Snapping SpongeBob back to reality.
Hey, Pat, you ever feel like you're forgetting something? Something important?
It suddenly dawns on him that he hasn't fed Gary in over a week, and he panics. Actually, he's horrified knowing he probably just killed his beloved snail. He searches his house only to find a note from Gary saying he's run away. SpongeBob has a total breakdown as he realizes just how badly he messed up. Sorry, man, you had that one coming. You can't just not feed a snail. What's wrong with you? Meanwhile, Gary's off in some distant town, wandering alone until a seemingly sweet old lady picks him up, mistaking him for her old pet snail. Might he have actually found a perfect forever home? Not on this show, buddy. Back in Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob's spiraling, frantically searching everywhere and putting up lost pet posters. He's losing hope, but then Mr. Krabs accidentally fires him up with some gruff encouragement.
Any problem you have can be solved with a little hard work.
And SpongeBob is back on the hunt, this time with Patrick in tow. That might actually be worse. While they're searching, Gary's new grandma is stuffing him with food constantly, which sounds good at first, until Gary finds her closet full of broken snail shells and realizes she's fattening him up to eat him. Suddenly he realizes how much trouble he's in as he scrambles to escape. Grandma's throwing cookies at him, calling it a labor of love, and it's all just awful, honestly. Luckily, he outsmarts her by sacrificing a random gangster snail she mistakes for him, and he bolts. But that poor gangster snail is doomed. Anyway, back home, SpongeBob's just miserable, crying and blaming himself for pushing Gary to run away. And to be fair, yeah, it is all his fault. When he finally steps outside, he sees Gary coming back. Their reunion is this heart-wrenching moment as SpongeBob promises to make things right, to never take Gary for granted again. But after all that force-feeding, Gary just lets out this exhausted meow. Like, dude, please, no food. And with that, they head home. SpongeBob swearing that things are gonna be different this time. But will they be? Not today, man. There's something tragic about SpongeBob without Gary. Unfortunately, Gary doesn't agree. Which is why in this next episode, Dumped, he basically bails on SpongeBob for someone better. Ouch. So SpongeBob and Gary are having a sweet game of tag, like always, and Patrick shows up wanting in on the fun. And wouldn't you know it, by the end of the day, Gary's practically glued to Patrick's side, even wanting to spend the night at Patrick's house. They're like twinsies. SpongeBob, being the good guy he is, agrees, thinking it's just a one-night thing. But come morning, Gary's still hooked on Patrick, and he has no interest in going back. As for Patrick, well, he's convinced Gary wants to stay with him forever, and hell, he just claims Gary like it's a done deal. What the hell, man? Poor SpongeBob is devastated, but puts on a brave face, believing that Gary will never leave him. But when it comes down to it, Gary actually chooses Patrick over him. Can you believe that? After all this time, that little rat leaves him? Totally heartbroken, SpongeBob decides to find a new pet to fill that Gary-sized hole in his life. He doesn't need some two-timing snail ruining his happiness. First, he picks up Rex, this loyal little worm, hoping to rub his eternal appreciation in Gary's face. But then, as is pretty typical in Bikini Bottom, Wretch ditches him immediately, hitching a ride on the next bus out of town to avoid spending one more minute with Spongebob. Pretty sure everyone's done that once, or 16 times. So then Spongebob goes for a backup pet, this mean-tempered snail named Larry, and goes above and beyond to keep Larry happy. He even gives this little guy his own bed, but it's all for nothing. Larry's just awful, leaving Spongebob more miserable than ever. He basically adopted a slightly more vicious Squidward. When Patrick and Gary stop by to do laundry, Spongebob's completely desperate, practically begging Gary to come back.
Please come home! I'm a wreck without you!
But Patrick smugly tells him to move on, saying Gary's made his choice. Spongebob just can't take it, pleading and offering Gary anything to come back. It's actually kind of heartbreaking seeing how sad he is.
Gary!
Then, suddenly, Gary crawls right into the washing machine after Patrick's shorts. Turns out, all this time, Gary wasn't sticking with Patrick for him, but for the damn cookie in his pocket. Gary was just using Patrick this whole time.
How pathetic.
Dang, you think you know someone. The second he munches down the cookie, he's back with SpongeBob like nothing ever happened. SpongeBob's overjoyed, reunited with his buddy, but Patrick, he's left standing in the doorway staring after them with his sad, crushed look, muttering, "Gary, I thought what we had was special." Nah, man, these cookie diggers only ever want one thing. So now everything is back to normal and Gary and SpongeBob can make some beautiful memories. Which is the exact thing Squidward has never done. It's why the episode Are You Happy Now is such a bummer. So the episode starts with Patrick digging through the dumpster out back of the Krusty Krab, gnawing on some leftover Krabby Patty like it's fine dining, which for him it probably is. Inside, SpongeBob is reading his prized The Krusty Krab Work Schedule book.
What's so great about this?
Practically glowing about the happiest memories page and how great his life has always been. Squidward's already sick of it, grabs the book and accidentally drops it on the grill.
I accidentally burned up your memories.
Don't worry, Squidward. I have a whole cabinet of backups.
Nice try, Squiddy. But much to SpongeBob's horror, he discovers that Squidward has no happy memories whatsoever. He's just been miserable his whole life, which is kind of heartbreaking.
Do you cry yourself to sleep at night?
I hear you crying all the time.
Well, with joy, Squidward. With joy.
So he tries to rope Squidward into making some happiest memories of his own. First up, a concert. Except Squidward gets his eye jabbed by a rogue violin bow, ruining any good vibes right out of the gate. Next attempt, a museum trip. Things look up when one of Squidward's old art pieces actually makes it into an exhibit, but a big-name art critic torches it with a flamethrower. You can actually see Squidward's soul crumbling in this one. It's not a memory he will be treasuring. Finally, SpongeBob drags him on a hot air balloon ride, but Squidward's terrified of heights, and after a freakout, they plummet down onto a mountain, ruining some poor dude's first-to-the-top moment. They're practically bounced right back home, and Squidward's ready to throw in the towel, convinced he'll never know happiness, let alone with SpongeBob around. I honestly think this might be one of the saddest moments of the entire show, to see Squidward accepting that he's just gonna be miserable forever. Like, man, believe in yourself. Fast forward
2 weeks later.
Squidward's a miserable hermit in his own house, basically rotting in his chair. But SpongeBob's on a mission, trying to get a reaction out of him any way he can. First, by peeking in the window, Squidward slams the curtain shut. SpongeBob even manages to get himself stuck in Gary's shell, crashes into Squidward's place, and breaks the shell. Then he tries phoning him, but Squidward just throws the phone back into his house, resulting in a busted eardrum for SpongeBob. Finally, in his most deranged attempt yet, SpongeBob faxes himself over, only to be shredded and thrown out by Squidward. I don't understand why SpongeBob is always so willing to get himself ripped apart. But does any of this actually stop SpongeBob? Nope. In a last-ditch effort, he traps Squidward in a box and hauls him to the Krusty Krab where he's arranged a party for him, except it's just 100 papier-mâché SpongeBobs. Or to put it another way, it's unhinged. Squidward's nightmare fuel. He snaps, smashing every last one to bits, and in this glorious destructive spree, he's finally happy. Squidward's happiest memory is demolishing a whole army of Spongebobs. Actually, I can kind of relate to that. At least Squidward has finally managed to find the thing that brings him joy.
I feel wonderful!
It will really help him when he has to cope with his total lack of artistic talent. This next episode is Artist Unknown. So Squidward is all geared up to teach an art class, thinking he's gonna be the next big art teacher in Bikini Bottom. But when the doors open, every single student he's hyped to teach is actually there for a cooking class and bails out, leaving him stuck with SpongeBob. His worst nightmare. It could not get worse. Oh wait, it just did.
If I'm lucky, Mr. Talent will rub his tentacles on my art.
Right from the start, SpongeBob's somehow a frickin' art prodigy. Squidward tells him to draw a circle, and SpongeBob just casually turns it into a perfect human head, then erases it to leave behind a flawless circle like it's nothing. Squidward's blood is boiling. He's trying to show off his skills, but every time he makes a mess, SpongeBob outdoes him by a mile. Circle, perfect. Paper, turns it into origami. Marble, SpongeBob carves Michelangelo's David with one chisel stroke while Squidward just makes rubble. Squidward's ego is shattered, but SpongeBob, clueless and loyal, actually believes he's failing because of Squidward's jealousy-driven criticisms. It's so sad to see that Squidward genuinely cares about something he's so naturally bad at. Eventually, Squidward just can't take it anymore and throws SpongeBob out of the class entirely. Poor SpongeBob blames himself, literally climbs into a dumpster and has it hauled off like he's trash, muttering that he deserves it. Squidward feels a tiny bit guilty, but he's still thrilled to be rid of his competition. Now he won't be humiliated when people come to look at his artwork. And wouldn't you know it, that is exactly what is happening. This fancy art collector, Monty Moneybags, waltzes in ready to pay top dollar for unique art. Squidward jumps at the chance, but surprise, surprise, Moneybags thinks all of Squidward's self-portraits are total crap. He only wants SpongeBob's statue, and Squidward, lying through his teeth, claims it's his. I mean, he has to get some kind of validation in life, I guess. But karma's lurking around the corner. Squidward knocks the head off the statue while trying to load it up for Monty, who just shrugs and says, "Fine, make me a new one. I'll be back tomorrow." Now Squidward's in a desperate panic.
I gotta fight SpongeBob!
He races to the dump to beg SpongeBob to make him another masterpiece that he can take credit for. SpongeBob agrees, but he's taken Squidward's lessons so much to heart that he's totally lost his artistic touch. All he can produce now is garbage, and all because Squidward had to go and open his damn mouth. Squidward's fury explodes. He loses his mind and just starts smashing slabs of marble in a rage. When Moneybags returns, Squidward's forced to pass the blame for all of this catastrophic mess onto the janitor.
As of now, it's his responsibility!
But in a twist he never sees coming, his fit of rage accidentally sculpted the most beautiful statue of David anyone's ever seen. Moneybags practically falls over himself in awe, declaring the janitor a genius. So even when he finally triumphs, Squidward manages to snatch defeat from the wide-open jaws of victory. Obviously, SpongeBob is a naturally gifted talent. But what he isn't is normal, and it turns out that he doesn't really like to be reminded of that. This is not normal. So Squidward's just trying to catch some sleep when SpongeBob decides to have a meltdown for no apparent reason. Pretty much a typical day of the week then. Dude's running around like he's possessed, and when Squidward says he isn't normal, SpongeBob becomes totally convinced something's off with him. Which there is, but, you know, now it's bothering him. Of course, SpongeBob freaks out and decides he's gotta figure out how to be normal. But instead of chilling out, he just plants himself right on top of Squidward while he's asleep, babbling about how to be normal. Squidward obviously kicks him out, totally done with SpongeBob's weirdness. So now SpongeBob goes down the rabbit hole of normal by watching some lame video tutorial. He's determined to reinvent himself. So over the next few weeks, he slowly morphs into this bland, rounded sponge with no holes, no buck teeth, none of his quirks left. It's actually really depressing to see him lose all of the most lovable aspects of himself. He even replaces his whole life, replaces his pineapple house with some generic suburban box, gets a cubicle at the Krusty Krab, and starts printing out flat, tasteless Krabby Patties. Mr. Krabs is psyched at first, thinking it's efficient, but then the customers are all upset and SpongeBob eventually loses his job. Normal SpongeBob is just sad. Really sad. Then Patrick shows up, excited to goof around like old times, but SpongeBob's not about it. He tells Patrick he'd rather do boring, everyday stuff than play or have fun at all. Heartbroken, Patrick walks away, leaving SpongeBob to his normal misery. SpongeBob even tries hanging out with Squidward again, but this time he tells Squidward he's the weird one, with his big nose, strange eyes, and no pants. Squidward loses it and kicks him out again, which hits SpongeBob hard. He really has no friends now. He's just some miserable, mediocre, average, round thing. Sponge bland round pants. Finally, SpongeBob realizes being normal sucks. He's miserable, lonely, and he's lost every part of himself that made him happy. Desperate to change back, he tries to rewire himself, but nothing works, so he begs Patrick to help make him weird again. They go through a series of ridiculous normalcy-breaking stunts, and SpongeBob finally starts getting his old quirks back, bit by bit. He's very close to being that lovable weirdo again. But then, right when he thinks he's back to himself, he reverts to that bland, smooth sponge again. It seems like he's stuck like this forever. Until Squidward, of all people, shows up looking normal as hell. That's all it takes. SpongeBob snaps out of it and becomes his crazy self again. I guess that's why he's weird as hell at all times. Squidward is just equally weird. He hugs Squidward, thanking him for helping him realize being normal is for suckers. Finally, he's himself again, embracing his weirdness, because that's who he's supposed to be. It's actually a pretty wholesome, heartwarming ending. SpongeBob finally learns to embrace his true self, which ironically is the exact opposite of what he does in this next episode. It's nature pants. So SpongeBob's working at the Krusty Krab one day when his mind totally drifts off. He's dreaming of ditching the daily grind and living carefree in jellyfish fields as a jellyfish. There's really no point in trying to work that one out. Of course, a fire breaks out because he's so checked out. Krabs laughs his ass off when SpongeBob says,
I've been thinking about giving up my cold industrial life in favor of a more natural and free life among the jellyfish.
telling him he wouldn't survive a day. But SpongeBob's dead serious, so he just up and quits, handing out his stuff to everyone like he's never coming back. Patrick's heart's practically breaking as SpongeBob gives him his beloved jellyfishing net, Old Reliable, along with a bunch of other random junk. Even Sandy tries to knock some sense into him, but SpongeBob's set on this whole jellyfish fantasy. He does not want to exist as an actual person sponge thing anymore. Saying his goodbyes, SpongeBob dramatically strips down, leaving just his shoes on, and heads for Jellyfish Fields, flopping around like a jellyfish wannabe while his friends stand there stunned, which is really the only valid response to this.
I'll give him a week.
I'll give him 11 minutes.
Patrick sad!
It's heartbreaking, really. Once he's out in Jellyfish Field, SpongeBob's trying to fit in with the jellyfish, but he just sticks out like a sore thumb. Patrick and Sandy even throw a picnic out there to lure him back, but SpongeBob's stubborn as hell, saying he's a jellyfish now. Whatever you say, buddy. That sends Patrick into another wild breakdown, so he grabs Old Reliable, ready to hunt SpongeBob down if he won't come back. Patrick's got this jar ready for him too, so his bestie will be like a trophy. SpongeBob's desperate, running for his life as Patrick chases him all over Jellyfish Field, finally escaping by hiding in a hive. Well, now that problem is over, but then the jellyfish swarm him, stinging him until he has to run away. That night, he's sleeping in some grim cave and wakes up covered in itchy, poisoned sea urchins, scratching like crazy and realizing that maybe living wild isn't so great after all. Crushed, he stumbles back to Bikini Bottom, muttering about how he gave everything up for nothing. Welcome to the real world, man. It sucks here. When he finally drags himself home, all his friends are there with a welcome home party, and SpongeBob just melts with relief. He gets his Krusty Krab hat back, everyone piles into a big hug, even Squidward, who's grumpy as hell.
Even Squidward misses you!
Whoopee!
And just as he's thinking, it's great to be home, that damn urchin itch spreads to everyone else. Bet they're wishing he didn't come home now. Or at least they will when he starts creating chaos everywhere like usual. Especially if that chaos ends up inflicting serious terror and PTSD on innocent people, like Plankton, in the episode One Course Meal. Alright, so this one starts off with Mr. Krabs literally sleeping in a bathtub full of money when he suddenly smells smoke. Turns out it's Plankton, of course, up to his usual tricks, blowing up the Krusty Krab with some new explosives and another dumbass attempt to get the secret formula. But this time, he's actually pretty close to making it a reality. Plankton catches both Spongebob and Mr. Krabs in this chaotic mess and starts tickling Mr. Krabs with a feather. But then Spongebob, bless his clueless little soul, accidentally spills where the secret formula is hidden. Damn it, Spongebob, you had one job, bro! Right at that moment, Pearl waltzes in and Plankton loses his mind and bolts back to the chum bucket because, surprise, he's scared to death of whales. It turns out Plankton's got some seriously dark whale trauma. He tells Karen about how whales apparently ate his whole family, but Karen couldn't care less, which is crazy cruel considering she's his wife or something. Then, in a twist, Pearl keeps appearing around the chum bucket, supposedly looking to snack on Plankton. This drives him half insane over the next couple of weeks.
16 paranoia-filled days later.
He's totally freaked out, having nightmares of some demon Pearl chomping down on him and his whole family. But actually, it's Mr. Krabs in disguise as Pearl the entire time, tormenting Plankton into a meltdown. That is insanely dark, even for Mr. Krabs. It's basically psychological torture. Eventually, Plankton hits rock bottom, lying down on the road, literally hoping to get run over by a bus just to escape his whale fears. SpongeBob sees this and, feeling bad, goes to confront Mr. Krabs about his messed up scare tactics. But Mr. Krabs, no shame whatsoever. Seriously, he's like,
Well, too bad, SpongeBob. He tried to steal the formula.
yeah, bro, but you don't have to kill the guy. Come on, man, wake the hell up. So SpongeBob decides to give Plankton a little inside info on Mr. Krabs' own worst fear. And oh boy, when Plankton finds out that his weeks of terror were all Mr. Krabs in a Pearl costume, he's fuming and ready for payback. This one is going to be loud and... oh, no, it's not going to be loud at all. Plankton comes up with his own plan. He hires a mime. Yep, apparently mimes are Mr. Krabs' worst nightmare, and sends this silent terror right after him. Just as things get intense, SpongeBob decides to mess with Plankton using holographic whales to keep him from ever touching the formula again. In the end, SpongeBob releases Mr. Krabs, but that poor guy's still getting harassed by the mime, and to be honest, he absolutely had that coming. But at least SpongeBob is having the time of his life, which is good timing because it's the holiday season, and SpongeBob has never actually heard of Christmas. So there's that. It's Christmas who? Alright, so SpongeBob's out in full karate gear, ready to jump Sandy, who's just minding her business putting up Christmas lights. But of course, SpongeBob thinks she's on fire or something, so he just drenches her with seawater. Electrics and water, what could go wrong? But then Sandy discovers that he's never even heard of Christmas,
Christmas who?
What? Y'all never heard of Christmas?
leaving her in major shock. So she tells him the whole holiday deal, and SpongeBob, bless his little spongy heart, gets obsessed with it. Because come on, Christmas is about the most SpongeBob holiday of them all. Next thing you know, he's spreading this whole Christmas story at the Krusty Krab, telling Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs all about this Santa Claus who gives out gifts. Everyone in Bikini Bottom gets pumped, except for old grumpy Grinch Squidward. He doesn't believe a word of this. They all write these wishful little letters to Santa, sticking them in bottles to shoot up to the surface. Meanwhile, Squidward's just closing his blinds, trying to ignore all these Christmas crazies decorating his house. All he wants is some time alone, away from all the crazies. As Christmas Eve rolls around, everyone's out singing by this big coral tree, practically vibrating with excitement, waiting for Santa. But Squidward's not having it. He's just sitting there rolling his eyes at the whole spectacle. And then Santa doesn't show. Everyone's crushed, just standing there in the cold, realizing they waited all night for a no-show. It's a massive disappointment. They turn on Spongebob, accusing him of hyping up a total lie. Poor Spongebob's devastated, and Squidward, he's basking in it, even taking pictures of Spongebob's humiliation. How cruel do you have to be, man? Read the damn room. And then Spongebob, the pure soul he is, just gives Squidward
I still want you to have this.
a Christmas present, a driftwood clarinet he carved himself. Squidward, for once, actually feels bad, realizing that all Spongebob wanted was to make people happy.
What have I done to poor SpongeBob?
He's so moved by the whole thing that he realizes he wants to do something to fix this mess that he partly created. So he dresses up as Santa and gives SpongeBob a little holiday miracle, making SpongeBob think Christmas really came to Bikini Bottom. But it doesn't stop there. A kid sees Santa Squidward and asks for a present.
Do you have a present for me, Santa?
So he gives her a random wrench, but then everyone shows up wanting presents, and Squidward ends up giving away practically everything he owns. It's a surprisingly wonderful thing for Squidward to do, especially to fix the disappointment everyone felt. When he finally heads inside, he finds a thank you note from the real Santa. Yeah, that's right, Santa's real, and Squidward's left totally speechless as he watches Santa fly overhead. In disbelief, Squidward just shrugs it off as insanity, heads back inside, and plays his new clarinet, shaken, a little humbled, and just maybe with his heart a little less cold. He still can't play that clarinet well, though. That's a gift he'll never be given. And even if he does eventually work it out, there will probably be some cost to it. After all, you can't enjoy a pie without the risk of death. Well, if you get it from Squidward, that is. This is Dying for Pie. Alright, so Squidward is having this dream where he's on some tropical island, feeling all chill, playing his piano, until suddenly the whole thing gets wrecked by SpongeBob. It's a nightmare, and Squidward wakes up angry and probably needing coffee. It's hard to know which is the stronger urge. But there's no escape. At the Krusty Krab, it's Employee Brotherhood Day, and the whole thing's all about giving each other heartfelt gifts. SpongeBob goes full creep mode and hands Squidward a sweater made out of his eyelashes. Weird. When Squidward laughs it off, SpongeBob's devastated, hands him another sweater literally made out of his own tears, and Squidward's just trying to brush it off because, come on bro, these are stalker gifts. What are you doing right now? But Squidward still needs a gift, and God forbid he actually makes something himself. He doesn't care about SpongeBob that much. So he finds these shady pirates selling pies that are clearly bombs, but Squidward ignores that and buys one to pawn off as his homemade gift. Mr. Krabs, ever the paranoid boss, grabs a crumb of it, trips, and boom! The Krusty Krab's nearly obliterated. Turns out that this pie is one hell of an explosive, and now Mr. Krabs is giving Squidward that stare like he's a murderer because SpongeBob's about to be blown to smithereens from the inside out. Oh damn, well, nobody could have anticipated this turn. So Squidward's got until sunset to make SpongeBob's last hours special. The whole situation is killing him. He's freaking out, imagining SpongeBob exploding, and now he's on this mission to give him the best day ever before his inevitable death. SpongeBob's got this massive list, his friendship list, full of wild, pointless activities. They do everything on it. Squidward's literally bending over backwards to make SpongeBob happy, all while knowing he's the reason SpongeBob's a ticking time bomb. And SpongeBob, he has absolutely no idea what is going on. He's blissfully ignorant as always.
The lad's got until sunset before that bomb hits his lower intestine.
Hey, it's Mr. Krabs! Hi, Mr. Krabs!
Finally, they're watching the sunset, and Squidward's bracing for the worst. SpongeBob's counting down his final seconds, and Squidward's in full meltdown mode, expecting an explosion any second. But nothing happens. Why did nothing happen? He's supposed to be dead. Why isn't he dead? SpongeBob, still totally alive, casually mentions he saved that pie for them to share later. And Squidward realizes this whole thing was a colossal misunderstanding. He's relieved, but also, the whole day was for nothing. But of course, SpongeBob trips, the pie slips, and kaboom! Bikini Bottom's basically gone in a mushroom cloud, and Squidward's the last one left, muttering, ouch. All that emotional turmoil, and in the end, it was all for nothing. Also, Bikini Bottom has just been basically destroyed for all eternity, but apparently nobody is concerned about it. Everyone can count on Bikini Bottom coming back like nothing ever happened. Just like guaranteeing SpongeBob will spend most of the day sobbing his eyes out over nothing. It's a day without tears. This may be the most tear-jerking episode ever made. For SpongeBob, anyway. The episode starts with SpongeBob all pumped for his day. Life's good. Until, bam, he stubs his toe and bursts into tears. And that's only the beginning. He's trying to get dressed, snags his favorite outfit on a hanger, and yep, cue another meltdown. Even the radio gets him because, of course, it's playing the saddest damn song he's ever heard. At this point, Squidward next door is already fed up with this non-stop sobbing. He just wants to hear his own thoughts for once. At the Krusty Krab, things somehow get worse. SpongeBob's making a Krabby Patty, but Mr. Krabs scares him and the patty hits the floor. That sends SpongeBob into a full-blown crisis again. He tosses the patty, lamenting the injustice of it all. Squidward, totally over this, yells at him,
SpongeBob, will you stop crying?
but that just makes SpongeBob wail even louder. Squidward's about ready to snap. SpongeBob is an emotional wreck and he has had enough of it. So Squidward finally confronts SpongeBob, telling him he's cried 43 times today, and it's not even 2 p.m. SpongeBob's in disbelief, so Squidward whips out a whole highlight reel of SpongeBob's greatest hits in crying over the years. And well, it hits SpongeBob hard. He realizes Squidward's right and swears,
I promise I won't cry anymore.
he can control himself. He promises. But Squidward's not convinced. He bets SpongeBob he can't go the rest of the day tear-free. The stakes? SpongeBob has to do a year's worth of chores for Squidward if he cries even once. If he holds it in, Squidward's stuck at a SpongeBob sleepover for the night. Well, Squidward needs him to lose now. So now Squidward's hell-bent on making him break. He tries everything. Gorgeous sunsets, sad songs on the clarinet, bedtime stories with tragic endings. He even throws depressing news at him, and somehow SpongeBob holds it all in.
You know what they say about that television, rots the brain.
Sweating and straining, but refusing to shed a single tear. Midnight finally hits, and he's free to let it all out. And oh, does he. Bikini Bottom's practically flooded with his backlog of tears. But now Squidward's gotta spend the night at SpongeBob's place. The episode wraps up with Squidward being the one crying, totally regretting his bet, while SpongeBob's all comforting, patting his back like, there. The tables have turned, and Squidward's just sitting there probably wishing he never made that bet in the first place. Pretty much a typical day in Squidward's life, really. But hey, I'm just a guy who likes cartoons, so I'll return to my shows. I'll catch you in the next video.